The story of how David defeated Goliath is one of the most well-known accounts in the Bible. At its core, as the text highlights, this event was a manifestation of God's glory and power, working in an unexpected and extraordinary way. A seemingly unprepared young shepherd from Israel triumphed over Goliath, the Philistines' greatest warrior, who had already terrified the Israelites. Before the battle, the Bible tells us that David picked up 5 smooth stones and placed them in his shepherd's pouch. As strange as it may seem, David went into battle armed only with a staff, a sling, and the 5 stones he took from the brook, essentially the tools of a shepherd. Though the sling was a simple weapon, it was widely used by armies in ancient times. These 5 stones had an obvious purpose. They were meant to be used in his sling. However, since David only used 1 stone to defeat Goliath, many have wondered whether there was a deeper reason behind his choice to take exactly 5 stones. Did these 5 stones carry a special meaning? That's exactly what we'll explore in this video. To fully understand the story of David's 5 stones, it's important to consider its context. At the time, as recorded in 1 Samuel 17, Israel was under constant threat from the Philistines, a powerful enemy nation that lived along the coastal region of Canaan. The Philistines were known for their military strength and their advanced iron weaponry, giving them a strategic advantage over Israel, which still relied on more rudimentary weapons. During this period, Saul was Israel's first king, chosen by the people because of his height and imposing appearance. He was seen as the ideal leader to guide Israel in battle. However, despite his physical stature, Saul had turned away from God in his heart and no longer acted according to divine guidance. His spiritual leadership had weakened, and it affected the morale of Israel's army. In this scenario of both spiritual and military vulnerability, God raised up the most unlikely candidate, David. Still a young shepherd, David had no military training or battle experience. Yet, he had unshakable faith in the God of Israel, whom he had served since his youth. His encounter with Goliath took place at a time when Israel's army was intimidated and paralyzed by fear. But the journey that led David to that battlefield actually began chapters earlier, when the prophet Samuel anointed him as the future king of Israel after God rejected Saul. However, before stepping into any position of national leadership, David continued to care for his father's sheep in Bethlehem. The decisive moment came when his father, Jesse, sent him to bring provisions to his brothers, who were on the battlefield with Israel's army. When David arrived at the camp, he heard Goliath's taunts and was outraged by the Philistines' defiance against the God of Israel. Without hesitation, he volunteered to fight the giant, despite having no combat experience. King Saul, upon hearing of David's willingness, tried to discourage him, insisting that he was no match for Goliath. But David reminded Saul that as a shepherd, he had already faced lions and bears to protect his flock, and that, just as God had delivered him then, he would deliver him again. His confidence was in God's faithfulness, not in his own strength. After unsuccessfully trying to equip David with his royal armor, Saul allowed him to fight with his own tools, a staff, a sling, and the 5 stones he had gathered from the brook. This is where the central question arises. What was the significance of these 5 stones? The truth is, the Bible does not provide a specific explanation for why David chose exactly 5 smooth stones. Nowhere in the text is a special meaning assigned to them. However, over time, many interpretations and speculations have emerged. Some suggest that the 5 stones represent different aspects of the relationship between God and humanity, such as faith, obedience, service, prayer, and the Word of God, but there is no biblical basis for this idea. Others claim the stones symbolize emotions David may have felt at that moment, such as fear, anger, courage, humility, or gratitude, yet there is no scriptural support for this either. Another popular theory is that the 5 stones represent God's grace in that situation. Others speculate that they symbolize the 5 books of the Torah as a metaphor for the foundation of Jewish faith defeating the enemy. Again, none of these interpretations can be justified based on the biblical text. A more recent theory suggests that David chose 5 stones because Goliath had 4 brothers, meaning he was prepared to face not only Goliath, but also his siblings. However, this is pure speculation. While the Bible does mention other giants who fought for Philistines, and one of them appears to have been Goliath's brother, 1 Chronicles 20 verse 5. There is no indication that these giants were present during David's battle with Goliath. Later in biblical history, David and his men would indeed defeat several giants, but linking the 5 stones to them is an assumption not supported by the text. A simpler and more logical explanation is that David chose 5 stones simply as a practical preparation. He had full confidence that God would give him victory, but he didn't know how many stones he would need in battle. So he gathered a handful, 5 in this case, as any prepared warrior would. Therefore, there is no mention in the Bible of these stones carrying spiritual symbolism, emotional meaning, or any hidden message. In reality, the many speculations about their significance often distract from the main focus of the biblical text. The key point of this passage is not the number of stones David picked up, nor any supposed hidden meaning behind them. Whether he had taken 3, 6, or 10 stones, it would not have changed the outcome. The central theme of the story is the manifestation of God's power and glory through an unlikely young shepherd who defeated the most feared enemy warrior with the simplest of tools. Instead of searching for mystical symbolism in the 5 stones, we should focus on what the Bible actually highlights: David's unwavering trust in God's power to overcome the giant. Before gathering the stones, David had already rejected Saul's armor and sword. Though these were the finest weapons in Israel, belonging to the king himself, David chose instead to rely on what he knew: his staff, his sling, and, most importantly, his faith in the Lord. He did not go into battle relying on superior weaponry or personal skill, but in the name of the Lord of hosts. The Bible makes it clear David's victory was not achieved through human weapons, but through God's power. As 1 Samuel 17 verse 47 states, "The battle is the Lord's." The very name that Goliath and the Philistines mocked became their downfall. Therefore, searching for hidden meanings in the 5 stones is pointless when the passage itself glorifies God's name. David did not defeat Goliath because of his sling or his stones. He triumphed because the Lord was with him. So, we can confidently say that the 5 stones of David hold no mystical or symbolic significance. The true lesson from this story is that David's victory came not from weapons or earthly means, but from the power of the Lord of hosts, who fights for his people. When we reflect on this passage, we are reminded that, like David, we must put our trust in God in every battle we face. We do not win by our own strength or abilities, but through his power working in our lives. We must always remember that all glory belongs to the Lord. He can use the simplest and most unlikely means, even 5 smooth stones in a shepherd's pouch, to fulfill his purposes. This story teaches us a powerful lesson about faith and trusting God. David's victory was not about the weapons he used, but about his unwavering confidence in the Lord. While the world values strength, strategy, and experience, God values a heart that trusts him completely. How often do we face giants in our own lives, challenges that seem impossible to overcome? Like David, we must remember that the battle belongs to the Lord. No matter how big the problem appears, our faith in God is what truly brings victory. So, what giants are you facing today? Fear? Doubt? Difficulties? Just as David stepped forward with faith, trusting that God would fight for him, we too must stand firm, knowing that God is with us. If this message inspired you, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Your support helps us continue spreading powerful biblical truths. See you in the next video.